When I was a year old, my mother actually gave me to a total stranger in the street to save my life, because she didn't know if she'd be alive the next day. So I didn't see her for a month. Deep sense of abandonment, not being wanted. Now, I don't recall that. I can't recall being handed to a stranger in the streets of Budapest, because there's nothing to recall with. The brain's organ in the brain, the hippocampus, that encodes recall memory, is not developed then yet. It doesn't develop till later. But the emotional, implicit memory of abandonment is deep in me. When there's a loss, emotionally, that translates into biology. So it's not that there's biology here and no emotions here. It's that the emotions and the biology are completely inseparable. And what happens on the emotional plane inevitably will have its manifestations on a biological plane. So what you lose emotionally translates into biological events in your body. And that begins with brain development. I began to be interested in brain development when I was diagnosed with ADHD. I was 53, I think, 54, 53. And within a couple of months, 2 of my kids were diagnosed, which seemed to go along with the mainstream medical view that what we've got here is a genetic disorder, which I never bought into for a minute. And why didn't I buy into it? Because although I didn't know anything about the brain or how it developed, I knew something. The tuning out, the absent-mindedness that characterizes ADD is not a disease, inherited or otherwise. What is tuning out? It's an adaptive response to stress. So that if I were to stress you right now, but I mean that is to be verbally abusive, emotionally insulting, domineering, you would go into a stress state. And how could you deal with it? Well, you could just walk out the door. Or you could stand up and say, you can't talk to me like that, I will not accept it. And if you couldn't walk out, nor did you have the strength to confront me, to fight back, if flight or fight wasn't available to you, there's still a third thing you could do. There are, 100, 200 people here in the room with you, you could ask for help. But what if you couldn't do any of those things? Then how would you handle the stress? Well, you wouldn't. Your brain would handle it by a number of defense mechanisms, the salient of which would be dissociation. You dissociate, all of a sudden you're not here. Now you're not suffering as much. So it's simply a coping response is all it is. The way we adapt to early stress helps us endure that difficult period in the life of the helpless child, but those same adaptations become source of pathology, threaten your health, threaten the length, your longevity even. So what's adaptive in one situation, what's meant to be a temporary state, becomes a long-term trait. And when it goes from state to a trait, now it's a source of dysfunction and pathology. So that's what I intuited about the tuning out. But what I didn't know, and this is astonishing, is how the brain actually develops. And how the brain develops is in interaction with the environment. So that the brain is not genetically programmed. The potentials are genetically set, and the trajectory of development in terms of what circuits will develop when, that's set genetically, but how they will develop, how successfully they will unfold and connect, and what systems in the brain will become to dominate, that's not genetically programmed. That depends on the interaction of that individual with the environment. The most significant factor shaping the physiological development of the brain is the emotional relationship with the parenting environment. And the necessary condition for optimal brain development, which is so rarely available in North America, are parents who are emotionally available, consistently available, non-stressed, non-depressed, and mutually responsive or attuned to the child.